If you just like scroll through your social media feed today, you will inevitably see, thousands of new beauty and skincare brands.
Oh, yeah. Everywhere.
Right. And they all have this gorgeous packaging, incredible marketing, and they basically all claim to have these, revolutionary proprietary formulas.
Naturally.
But here's the secret. The vast majority of those founders, they don't own a single beaker.
Not one.
They don't own giant stainless steel mixing vats. They definitely don't own a warehouse. And they don't have like a team of cosmetic chemists on their payroll.
Yeah, they're tapping into this massive, completely hidden global ecosystem.
Exactly. So how do they actually do it? Because imagine you have a vision for a product, right? How do you get it from just a concept in your head into a physical bottle and ultimately, onto an e-commerce shelf without spending $50 million to build a factory?
Well, the short answer is private labeling, but executing that in today's landscape is a wildly intricate process. It's an entire parallel industry operating just behind the curtain of almost every consumer brand you see online. And it is evolving, faster than ever.
Which is exactly what we're exploring today. We're doing a deep dive into a really brilliant source from May 2026.
Oh, it's a great one.
Yeah, it's an article by Laurent Fabian from Ingredientsage, and it's titled Private Labeling Companies for Cosmetics, a Comprehensive Buyer's Guide.
It's just a remarkably thorough breakdown. I mean, Fabian doesn't just skim the surface. The guide really digs into the science, the sourcing, and honestly, the brutal realities of manufacturing partnerships.
Right.
It operates as a sort of masterclass in how to evaluate and negotiate with the exact people who will actually make your product.
So our mission today is to extract the ultimate blueprint from this source. We want to equip you with the exact timelines, the hidden regulatory traps you need to avoid, and the negotiation tactics required to get a clean label product launched successfully.
Yeah, it's a lot to cover.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this, because before you can formulate a single drop of your new serum or lotion, you have to know what is actually legally allowed to go into the bottle.
Right.
And the rules of the game change drastically depending on where you are trying to sell it.
Oh, completely. They're fundamentally different systems. I mean, the regulatory landscapes in the United States and the European Union, they operate on completely opposite philosophies.
Yeah.
And misunderstanding that tension is where a lot of new brand founders stumble right out of the gate.
So let's look at the U.S. first. Our source notes that in the U.S., cosmetics are regulated to ensure safety and truthful labeling, but pre-market approval isn't generally required.
Correct.
There is also this really interesting split in jurisdiction. Like the FDA oversees the safety aspects and the good manufacturing practices, but the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, is the one looking over your shoulder at your advertising claims to make sure you aren't, misleading anyone.
Yeah, in practice, the U.S. system essentially says, we trust you to do your homework. You are expected to conduct robust product testing, ensure accurate ingredient disclosures, and, diligently review your marketing claims. They let you go to market fairly easily.
But they will come after you if you mess up.
Exactly. They hold you fiercely accountable if something goes wrong later, or if your claims turn out to be completely false.
Which is a massive contrast to the European Union. The EU is governed by Regulation EC No. 1223/2009.
Yeah, and it is a much, much heavier lift. The EU operates on a pre-market notification system.
Right.
It goes through the Cosmetic Product Notification Portal, or CPNP, and you cannot legally place a single unit of product on the market until you have cleared this hurdle.
Wow.
Yeah. They require explicit, documented safety assessments and strict audited adherence to ISO 22716, which is the international standard for cosmetic good manufacturing practices.
Reading through the source, the best analogy I could think of is that it's like building a house.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like the U.S. system is like building the house, moving in and getting inspected after the fact to make sure the roof doesn't cave in.
Right.
But the EU system demands that your blueprints are stamped, approved, and rigorously analyzed by structural engineers before you are even allowed to pour the concrete.
That analogy holds up perfectly, especially when you look at the sheer paperwork involved. The EU requires something called a product information file, or PIF.
PIF. Okay.
And this isn't just a 2-page PDF. A PIF is a massive living dossier.
Wow.
It contains detailed toxicological profiles of every single raw ingredient, proof of the manufacturing method, packaging compatibility data, and specific allergen disclosures. I mean, it takes significant time and money to compile.
Which means if you are a founder who just designs your formula and packaging for the U.S. market, and then you try to expand to Europe a year later,
You're in for a rude awakening.
yeah, you might have to rip everything up and start completely over.
That is the exact trap Fabian warns against. The guide emphasizes a concept called proactive regulatory forecasting and adopting modular labeling.
Okay, modular labeling.
Yeah, if you plan to sell globally, you build flexibility into your design from day one.
But what does modular labeling actually look like in the real world? Like, are we talking about slapping a giant multi-layer peel-back sticker on a tiny bottle of eye cream?
I mean, sometimes.
Because from a branding perspective, that sounds terrible.
It does. It can take a few forms, though. Sometimes it is that multi-layer booklet label for the physical text. But, in 2026, it often involves dynamic QR codes.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. They link to geo-specific landing pages that display the compliant localized claims and ingredient lists. And that sits alongside a highly harmonized physical label that only prints the universally required symbols and INCI names.
So you basically separate the core regulatory data from the marketing claims.
Exactly. That way you can adapt preparatory without redesigning the entire physical box.
That is incredibly smart. So because these regulatory rules completely dictate what can go in the bottle, the next hurdle is figuring out how to actually make the product within those constraints.
Right, which brings us to your product development strategy. You basically have two paths with a private label partner.
Oh?
You can opt for end-to-end development, where the manufacturer takes total ownership of the concept, formulation, testing, and packaging sourcing. Or you can bring your own formula and just use them for formulation support and scale up.
Now, the timeline for this is probably the most critical piece of data for anyone listening. The guide states that a standard skincare line takes a 12 to 16-week development window from concept to shelf.
Yeah, that's pretty standard.
But it notes that if you have sensitive formulations, you have to add an additional 4 to 6 weeks just for stability testing.
Oh, absolutely.
What is actually happening during those extra 6 weeks?
Well, stability testing is essentially putting your product through a torture chamber.
A torture chamber.
Yeah, to simulate a 2-year shelf life in just a matter of weeks. They put the formula in these environmental chambers that cycle through extreme heat and freezing cold. It's called freeze-thaw testing.
Oh, wow.
They expose it to intense UV light. They even put it in a centrifuge to see if the oils and water separate under intense pressure.
That sounds intense.
It is non-negotiable, because if your premium lotion turns into a separated, watery mess in a hot delivery truck in Arizona, your brand is just dead on arrival.
Right. But the source also mentions a fast-track program to bypass some of this. It says you can use stock formulas and pre-approved packaging to accelerate the go-to-market timeline.
As you can.
Now, I have to ask a highly skeptical question here on behalf of the listener. If a founder just pulls a stock formula off the manufacturer's shelf, isn't that a total cop-out?
Well,
Like, won't your brand just be generic clone of 100 other cheap hotel lotions out there?
what's fascinating here is how the 2026 market has completely shifted the paradigm on stock formulas. Yeah. A stock formula today is not the generic low-quality filler it was a decade ago. It is often a highly optimized, rigorously tested base that has already passed all those brutal stability and safety tests we just talked about.
Oh, I see. So the value isn't necessarily in inventing a brand new base chemical compound from scratch.
No, not at all. The innovation happens at the edges.
Okay.
The modern strategy is to take that proven stock base and customize it with specific active ingredients like, say, a unique botanical extract.
Right.
And then you pair it with highly customized, sustainable packaging and transparent sourcing. You launch fast, get the product into consumers' hands, and gather immediate market feedback.
It sounds almost like the software industry.
Exactly.
You launch the minimum viable product, read the user reviews, and patch the bugs.
That's a great way to view it. It's an iterative tech industry approach applied to cosmetics. You use a flexible development framework with your manufacturer so that revisions and reformulations are an expected part of the early feedback loop.
Rather than a catastrophic failure.
Precisely.
Which is brilliant, assuming your manufacturer can actually handle that kind of iteration.
Right.
Because knowing your timeline and having a great strategy is completely useless if you partner with a factory that cuts corners.
Oh, absolutely.
So how do we actually vet vet these factories?
You have to rigorously interrogate them. I
Mhm.
mean, you cannot rely on a glossy marketing brochure or a well-designed website.
Obviously.
The guide demands a formal, repeatable evaluation process, and it starts with building a supplier scorecard.
Yeah, the source lists some very specific items for this scorecard. Certifications are obvious, like are they cruelty-free, vegan, organic? Do they have that ISO 22716 standard?
Right, those are table stakes.
But the operational documents are what really caught my eye. You need to ask for audit reports, certificates of analysis for raw materials, and batch records.
Yes, those documents prove traceability.
Right.
If a customer has a severe allergic reaction to a specific bottle of your serum, a proper batch record allows the manufacturer to trace that exact bottle back to the specific drum of raw materials it came from. And you can see exactly who signed off on it on the factory floor.
The document that the source highlights the most, though, is the KPA history.
Yes, the KP.
Corrective action and preventive actions. When I read about KPAs, I immediately thought of it like asking for the Carfax on a used car.
That's a great way to think about it.
Because it's not about how shiny the factory floor looks when you take a guided tour. A KP history is a documented record of what went wrong in the past and exactly how the factory fixed it.
I like the Carfax horse analogy, but we should probably push it a bit further.
Okay, how so?
Well, with a car, a completely clean history is usually a good thing. But in manufacturing, a completely blank KP history is a massive red flag.
Wait, really?
Yeah. It doesn't mean they're perfect. It means they're either hiding their mistakes or their quality control isn't robust enough to even catch them.
Oh, that is a great distinction. I wouldn't have thought of that. So what does a healthy KP actually look like?
A healthy KPAS shows a culture of root cause analysis. So let's say a batch of lotion failed a viscosity test. A bad KPA just says, threw away the batch, made a new one.
Right, that tells you nothing.
Exactly. A healthy KPA says, investigated the failure, found that a specific mixing valve was prone to temperature fluctuations, replaced the valve, updated the standard operating procedure for temperature monitoring, and retrained the staff.
Wow.
That level of detail is what you are looking for.
Because at the end of the day, when a bad batch makes it to a customer, it's your logo on the bottle, not the factory's.
Precisely. And in the modern e-commerce landscape, consumer trust is incredibly fragile.
Yeah, it takes years to build and seconds to destroy.
Right. A transparent quality assurance workflow isn't just about passing FDA audits, it's about brand survival. If a TikTok influencer questions your sustainability claims or your ingredient purity, and your manufacturer cannot instantly provide the documentation to back you up,
You're done.
yeah, the social media backlash will destroy your brand in a matter of days.
Okay, so let's say you've done the interrogation. You've reviewed the KPAs, the factory passes the audit, and you are ready to move forward. The relationship is getting serious.
Time for the paperwork.
Exactly. This is where we hit the fine print. The money, the minimums, and the intellectual property.
Oh. The dreaded MOQ.
Minimum order quantities.
Yeah, this is the ultimate barrier to entry.
According to the guide, typical cosmetic MOQs range from a few thousand units for standard products all the way to tens of thousands for customized lines.
Yes.
And if you're doing like dietary supplements alongside your skincare, those MOQs have to align with complex capsule counts and bottle sizes.
It gets complicated very fast.
But beyond the sheer volume of units, the source really drills down into the pricing models. It highlights the difference between FOB or EXW versus DDP.
Right, these are shipping terms and they dictate who carries the risk. So EXW stands for Ex-Works, or factory pricing.
Okay, let me pause you there. Because if I'm a startup founder working out of my garage in Ohio, and I sign an EXW contract with a factory in Milan, what does that actually mean?
Well,
Do I own the product as soon as it rolls off their assembly line? How do I get it across the ocean? Do I just hire a guy with a boat?
essentially, yes.
Wait, really?
I mean, not literally a guy with a boat, but EXW means you pay for the product at the factory door. The manufacturer's responsibility ends right there.
Oh, wow.
You have to hire a freight forwarder, organize the ocean or air freight, handle the export customs in Italy, and handle the import duties when it hits the U.S.
That sounds incredibly stressful.
It is. If the cargo ship gets delayed or the pallet gets stuck in customs because of a paperwork error, that is entirely your problem and your financial loss.
That sounds like a nightmare for someone who just wants to sell face cream. What is the alternative?
The alternative is DDP, delivered duty paid. Under DDP, the manufacturer handles everything.
Everything.
Yeah, the freight, the customs clearance, the import taxes, and they deliver it directly to your warehouse or fulfillment center.
Okay, that sounds much better.
You do pay a premium for DDP, but for a new founder, the predictable landed cost and the offloading of supply chain risk is usually well worth the margin hit.
That is crucial context. But speaking of risk, the section of the guide that completely fascinated me was the intellectual property.
Oh, the IP. Yeah.
Specifically regarding derivative formulations. Let's walk through a hypothetical scenario.
Yeah.
Say I bring a custom vegan lotion formula to a manufacturer, but when they try to scale it up in their massive vats, it separates.
Happens all the time.
Right, so the internal lab steps in, they tweak my formula, and they add a proprietary emulsifier to make it stable.
Well,
Who owns that new stable formula? Do they suddenly own my brand's secret sauce?
that exact scenario is why robust trade secret protections are totally non-negotiable.
Right.
If you don't define this in the contract, the manufacturer could argue that they hold the IP to the final, stable version of your product.
Which means they own my brand.
Essentially, yes. It means you're held captive. You could never take that formula to a second supplier if the first one raises their prices or, experiences a factory fire.
So you have to put it in writing that even if they tweak it, it remains your exclusive intellectual property.
Yes. The contract must explicitly outline ownership of any derivative formulations that result from their lab's troubleshooting.
Got it.
Furthermore, the guide emphasizes the need for service-level agreements, or SLAs, and change control procedures.
Change control meaning they can't just quietly swap out an ingredient if their usual supplier runs out.
Precisely. They cannot substitute your premium organic rosehip oil for a cheaper alternative without your explicit, documented approval.
Good.
A well-structured contract isn't just a shield to use in a lawsuit. It operates as a collaborative playbook. When the inevitable supply chain disruption happens, the contract dictates the exact communication protocols and approval steps to solve the problem together.
But, even the most ironclad contract and the best formula mean absolutely nothing if the physical product cannot reach your customers.
Exactly.
Which leads us to the final major hurdle outlined in the guide: mastering supply chain resilience.
It's the defining challenge of the 2026 market, without a doubt.
Yeah.
The guide breaks this down into the nearshore versus offshore debate.
Right. Nearshoring, meaning manufacturing closer to your home market, obviously gives you shorter lead times, easier facility audits, and better regulatory alignment.
Yes.
But offshore production usually offers significant cost efficiency. Do you just pick the one that fits your budget and hope for the best?
Relying on a single node is a massive vulnerability. The guide strongly advocates for dual sourcing.
Okay, so doing both.
Yeah, you build a supply chain strategy that leverages both. You might use an offshore partner in Asia for your high-volume, standardized SKUs to maximize your profit margins.
That makes sense.
But simultaneously, you keep a nearshore partner in North America or Europe on standby for your rapid iterations, limited edition drops, or just as a safety net if global shipping lanes get congested.
That agility is so crucial because of the market trends driving consumer behavior right now. The source highlights that e-commerce requires rapid turnaround manufacturing.
Very rapid.
Brands need shippable formats that don't leak in the mail, and they meet the demand for clean label values. The guide specifically mentions nesting claims. How are those actually verified in 2026? You can't just put a green leaf sticker on the box anymore, right?
Not at all. A nesting claim is a specific environmental or ethical claim made on the packaging about the sourcing within it.
Like stating the bottle is 100% post-consumer recycled plastic.
Exactly, or that the squalane is ethically harvested. Today, those claims require verifiable digital paper trails.
Wow.
Often, this involves third-party auditors or even digital product passports that track the raw material from the source farm to the final formulation. The burden of proof is entirely on the brand now.
To pull all of this complex theory into a practical reality, the guide concludes with something I found incredibly valuable: a 90-day pilot plan.
Oh, it's a fantastic framework.
It takes this overwhelming abstract process and forces it into a tangible step-by-step checklist. But I have to ask, is 90 days actually realistic to go from a concept to a physical product? Where do founders usually bottlenecks?
It is an aggressive timeline for sure.
Oh.
And the bottlenecks almost always happen in two places: packaging lead times and artwork approval.
Oh, really? Not the formula.
Usually not. Waiting on custom glass bottles from overseas can take months. That is why the pilot plan is specifically designed around validating the process, not necessarily launching 1 million units.
So what are the actual steps?
First, you compile your regulatory requirements by territory building, that PIF we discussed.
Okay, step one.
Second, you request the QA manuals, COA samples, and the KPA histories from your short list of manufacturers. Third, you conduct site visits and review their audit reports.
Right.
Finally, you issue a request for proposal, or RFP, using a strict evaluation rubric.
And the RFP isn't just asking for a price per unit. You're asking them to prove their labeling compliance workflow. You're asking for lead time guarantees for stock versus custom formulas and demanding proof of their sustainability verification.
Exactly. Once you negotiate those terms and lock down the IP contracts, you run the actual pilot. You execute a small initial order.
A test run.
Right. The goal of this 90-day sprint is to test the communication, validate the packaging compatibility, and ensure the regulatory review process works smoothly before you commit your entire budget to a massive production run.
That's so smart.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, survival in this industry isn't just about having a great formula.
It's about execution.
Yes. The companies winning retailer shelf space and consumer trust are the ones combining near-term agility with absolute documented traceability from the raw ingredient to the final box.
It is a completely different landscape than it was even 5 years ago. So, to recap the journey we've been on today, for you, the listener, if you want to launch a private label brand, you must start by understanding the severe differences between U.S. post-market rules and EU pre-market rules.
Vital first step.
You have to pick the right development track, balancing the speed of optimized stock formulas with the curation of your packaging. You must rigorously interrogate your partners by analyzing their KPA histories to ensure they actually fix their mistakes.
Look for those root causes.
Exactly. You have to lock down your IP, especially regarding derivative formulas. And finally, you must diversify your supply chain to balance cost with agility.
It requires a tremendous amount of due diligence, but the framework is there for anyone willing to do the work.
Which leaves us with one final, slightly uncomfortable thought to mull over.
Uh-oh.
If the 2026 landscape means that basically every brand has access to the exact same highly certified, perfectly optimized, rapid turnaround private label labs, what truly makes your brand yours?
That's a great question.
Right. If everyone has access to the exact same high-quality liquid in the bottle, is the real product actually the story you tell, the radical transparency you provide, and the community you build around it?
That is the existential question every founder has to answer before they spend a single dollar.
Something to think deeply about as you draft those 90-day pilot plans. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. Stay curious, keep learning, and we'll catch you next time.